Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. My name is Scott Morgan Rothland with my co-host, David Levin, and a very good longtime friend of mine, Barry Foote. Barry, thanks for being on the broadcast.
Oh, happy to be here, Scott. Good to be with you, David.
Thank you very much. We're glad you're on.
Well, you know, Barry, I'd say our days go back to the old Fort Lauderdale days, and we had an awful lot of fun back there, didn't we? Let's reminisce a little bit before we ease David Levin into this whole broadcast. Wasn't it a lot of fun?
Oh, it was, anytime you end up winning the league championship, it's fun. And it was my first year managing in the minor leagues, and I really didn't realize how old I was getting until I had an invitation from one of my players' child to wish him a happy birthday this past week. And that was Tim Byron, who was a pitcher with me in A, AA, and AAA ball with the Yankees. And Tim's birthday was his 60th. So that must mean that I'm like 108. So I was very, very surprised I had a former minor league player who was 60 years old now.
Well, geez, I'm 57, Barry. My goodness, I was a young pup back then, like a lot of us.
You were younger than my players.
Yeah, I was. I had stumped Merrill first, and then I ended up having you the second year. You guys had one thing in common. You were both great to work with, that's for sure.
Well, I appreciate that.
So let's reminisce about your Fort Lauderdale days. What was that like playing in that stadium? You know, obviously the Yankees developed a lot of minor leagues players that turned out to be major leagues. They put a lot of money into that minor league system.
Well, they did, and one of the things back then, now it's changed since my days of that was 1984, and things have changed a lot because at that point in time, the Florida State League was one of the best leagues in minor leagues to manage in because all the parks were spring training facilities, so you had very nice ballparks. Now, in today's minor leagues, every ballpark is a pretty nice ballpark. But back then, being able to manage in that league meant that you had very nice facilities. We had a bunch of good kids. It was a great group of kids. I got a chance to manage a bunch of them through three levels, A, AA, and AAA ball. So I have great memories of that time in my life. In fact, that season, really, if I look back at my 24 years of professional baseball, it would be one of my top seasons, even though it was the minor leagues. I had a great deal of fun there. It was a good learning experience. Florida, I enjoyed managing in Florida. So overall, I have very, very fond memories of that year.
Yeah, let's talk about the best players that you managed in the with the Fort Lauderdale Yankees, and then you can go ahead and talk about the other ones as well.
Well, when I look back at that particular team, probably the player who went on had the best career. Orestes Estrada had a very good career in Japan. He was really a superstar in Japan. Got some major league time here in the States, but was really a star over in Japan. Eric Plunk went on and had a good career in the major leagues as a pitcher. Tim Burtsis. There's a handful of guys. Dick Scott, who's still in baseball, got a little cup of coffee, but he's really made a mark in the minor leagues as a minor league director, and is now helping run the minor league system with the Floridians down south of you there. So it's our Marlins. It's really that was really a good group of ball players, and a good group of guys to be around. So that always makes it enjoyable. And that was one thing that Steinbrenner did a great job of, and that was giving us good quality character guys that had a high level of character, which makes managing a whole lot more fun.
Yeah, so let's talk about the players that you manage in the system per se. Yeah, George Steinbrenner didn't hesitate to invest a lot of money into that system, but you managed at all the different levels, so let's do a little bit of name dropping.
Well, as I look back on my career there, anytime you manage a guy who goes on and wins the Cy Young Award, he would be at the top of your list. That was Doug Drabek. Back when I was managing in the minor leagues, what Steinbrenner used that system for somewhat back then was moving players around and getting players to come in, trading them away.
Right.
So we traded away some guys that in order to help the major league club. Then that sort of changed around in the mid-'90s, in the early '90s, where they built up their organization and developed from within, and they ended up, with the foundation for all those great teams of the '90s that the Yankees had. So we were a little bit different, and I think that's probably one of the reasons that the Major League level struggled to really be competitive for about a 10-year period between the late '80s all the way up through until they, sort of had that dynasty ball club.
Okay, good point. All right, so David, what do you want to add?
Oh, first of all, really, I'm very thankful and I'm happy, excited about tonight. Another night where we get to talk about baseball, even though there isn't baseball. So let me start out. Let me ask you this, Barry. I'm going to take you back a little bit. Baseball is still kicking around the idea of playing several, game formats. I think the newest one was 76 that the owners and the league office offered today, but that hasn't been accepted. You were a player in your playing days during the baseball strike back in the early '80s. What was that like, and what similarities are there in you being involved in that? What the players may be going through now because they're not playing?
Well, there is a difference, and there's a striking difference. Because of the collective bargaining agreement rules and the rules of the Labor Relations Board, I was told, and I had a very long discussion, I won't tell you who it was with, but a guy who's been with the Players Association for 30 years in the management of it, and I didn't know this, but they have no right to strike on this matter. So they're going to end up, unfortunately for the players, they're going to end up with something that's going to be shoved down their throats. They're going to have to do whether they like it or not. In '81, we were allowed to go on strike, and I think we had a lot of, pretty significant grievances that ended up being ironed out. That, the only way to get the owner's attention at that point in time was through striking. That was the only leverage we had. This particular instance, and, back then we were looking at probably average salaries in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and now we're looking at average salaries being, I think, somewhere around $5 million. So there was at least probably a 10x difference in average salaries in the 80s all the way where we are now. This situation, this is one of those once-in-a-lifetime pandemics. Let's hope it's once in a lifetime. And it's just really a strange situation. It's so much different than what we were doing in '81, where, you had complete buy-in from the players, because at that point in time, the ownership really had leverage over everybody, and the only way to break that leverage was the only thing you could do, which was strike.
All right, Barry, let me ask you, what was it like working for George Steinbrenner?
Well, I think what was the difference for me than a lot of people that worked for him, if you came off the field as a player, I came off in '83. I had back injuries and stuff, and I ended up basically working as what they called a special assignment scout, and I reported directly back to George Steinbrenner. And he was a great guy to work with. I mean, he was tough, but I think he gave you a lot of respect come off the field, and I had just come off the field. So I have a great deal of respect for him, and he, as I look back, he had a lot of impact on my career as a manager and in my business life as well.
David?
So, actually, I'm glad to hear that, because, George Steinbrenner is part of baseball history for what he did for the Yankees with minor league baseball here in Florida. I don't think he gets the credit that maybe he deserves, because everybody knows what he does with the Yankees itself, especially during the 70s and 80s, constantly trading out managers, and the Reggie Jackson situation, Dave Winfield. It's good to hear that there's a different perspective on him. How do you think this situation plays out now? You said it was different from when you were allowed to strike as opposed to what is going on now. Do you think that we play a season first? And second, if we do, how many players are going to be so disgruntled about it that it ruins it for everybody?
Well, I think once the season's, when they decide whatever it's going to be, and one of the discussions I had with my friend who's with the Players Association, said he thought it was going to probably end up being more like a 60-game season. I think today's was, a 76 game that the owners came out. So it's going to be somewhere in that neighborhood. I think players, I don't think this sets things up real good for the next collective bargaining agreement, which they're going to be working on, I think, next year. I think it's going to be tough. And in all honesty, the players kind of had the edge of the owners for a while. I think the owners have the introduction of the new style of baseball and the usage of the statistics and the analytics that they're using now has changed the game. Players today are going to, if I was a player today, let me just put it this way. If I was a player today, I would go on strike over not getting money up front now. You can't have a $500,000. I know it's crazy money for the normal person, but these are very short careers. And if you're not going to get paid on the backside of your contract in those years after you're 30 years old, you better get the money up on the front side of your contract, or you're going to have to demand a shortening of the free agency down from 6 years to 4 years, which I doubt they'd want to do. So I think what you're going to see, they're going to battle hard to get money on their first 2 or 3 years of their contracts that they're not getting now, because there's no guarantee with the analytics they're using today that you're going to get paid after you're 30, 31 years old.
Well, Barry,
I think that's where the real battle's going to be.
Yeah, Barry, we need some more Bobby Bonilla contracts, because Bobby didn't make out so well with the former organization you played for with the Mets, did he?
That's true. That's true.
How would you like to have his agent?
Well, I don't know if it was the agent or as much as the dummies on the other side of the table.
Yeah, Bobby Bonilla made out like a bandit, and I think he gets paid every July, right? My goodness, somebody made out good, but that's a heck of a contract.
That's a matter, and I think they would agree now. I've always liked Wilpons. I like the Wilpons. I liked when I was working with the Mets, but that's a matter of greed. Let's face the facts. They got greedy because they thought they could take the money they owed Bonilla, and they were going to make a whole lot more money investing it with the Ponzi scheme, as it turned out. And then they ended up losing that money, and now they're having to pay Bobby for the next 20 years or whatever's left on that deal.
Well, here you go, folks. We're talking about the Ponzi scheme and Bobby Bonilla. My goodness, life is good, right? I think analytics. I don't know.
There you go.
Okay, we can stop now because nothing's going to top that on the conversation. We just need to let it go and let it simmer. Okay, Barry.
Yeah, David's losing his train of thought because of Bobby Bonilla and the Ponzi scheme. Go ahead, David. Continue.
I just can't believe you used that in the same sentence. That's amazing. I'm collecting my thought here. Hang on, I need a moment. There we go. You played not only for the Yankees, but you played for other organizations, and you had a solid career. What do you take from playing for the Phillies and with the Cubs, and do you the camaraderie and everything that goes into playing the game? Do you still keep in contact with some of the players that you have shared the field with?
Well, let's talk about each organization and what was special about them. When I started with Montreal, and that was a bunch of young kids in a foreign country that were learning to play the game, and I had an opportunity to become one of the first group of free agents. I chose to do that, and when I chose to do that, the Expos traded me to the Phillies. Now, in Philadelphia, in all honesty, I made a mistake there by signing a long-term contract after my first year with them, but I enjoyed the players so much and I thought we really had a chance to be almost a dynasty there, that I chose to sign a 5-year contract with them, which in reflecting back was probably a mistake. But that was a great group of guys there. I really enjoyed playing in Philly. We were really good. We won 101 games, I think, each year I was there. And then I got traded to the Cubs, which Chicago is probably as good a city as any place in the country to play. and it was a good group of guys there. We were really actually a pretty good ball club, and I enjoyed very much playing there. But there was another time that I kind of got caught in the circumstance of the Wrigleys had Mr. Wrigley had died, and they had decided to sell the club, and they dismantled the ball club. So they got rid of Russell, myself, Dave Kingman. Just go down the list. Anybody who was making any money, they got rid of before they sold the ball club. But fortunately for me, I went to the Yankees, and the Yankees certainly is a different and special sort of place to play. You know, I'd been in the big leagues 8 years when I went over from the National League to the American League to the Yankees. And I tell people right now, I was probably more nervous playing my first game in Yankee Stadium than any place I'd ever played. It's because it's just the history of that organization, the history of that ballpark, thinking about all the people who've gone down that tunnel onto that field. I mean, there's just nothing like New York. I mean, there really isn't. But I enjoy them all in their own special way. I can't look back at any of them and say that I didn't like it. The only thing I would go back and say, I did not like the weather in Montreal. It was so cold for so much of the year. We played the majority of my career in Jerry Park, and there was just a wide open, field with wind blowing through there, and that was some rough conditions quite often there.
So Barry,
how was the experience? Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So
you want to go ahead?
That's all right. So Barry, tell me, how did playing with the Yankees and all the other baseball teams help shape you as a coach, manager, and a mentor?
Well, I think from the standpoint, I learned something from everybody. As I go back and look at my career, probably the most impactful manager I ever had was Gene Mock. Really? Mock was way ahead of everybody else, the way of his philosophy of the game and how he prepared for the game and his thoughts on the game. But I look at all the people I was around. The Yankees, that you felt like there was an expectation that, you were going to win, that you needed to win. And that was instilled in me in New York. And there was a certain way of carrying yourself in New York that was different than any other organizations I'd been in. And, George had rules about dress codes, and even in the minor leagues, we couldn't wear shirt tails out. You had to wear a belt. I mean, there was just a lot of things about it that I liked, semi-militaristic in some ways. But, so I think when you have a 23-year career in that sport, you take a little bit from everywhere. And I think I did that. And, from the standpoint of just managing, Gene Mock was, in my opinion, was, by far the best, smartest, most strategic manager I ever played for.
Okay, David, go ahead. Sorry, I'll cut you off.
No, that's okay. We're still working on this, Scott. We're a work in progress.
I think we're doing okay, but go ahead. Continue your thought anyways.
Well, Barry, you said about playing in Montreal, and I have a soft spot for the Expos and how baseball was taken away, and when I think of the Nationals winning the World Series, I'm still thinking in my head a part of Montreal won that. How much different was it because the Expos were new and they were, it was an idea of taking baseball out of the United States. How much harder was it to adapt to that kind of culture and situation?
Well, I got a taste of that in my AA year in the Eastern League. Mm-hmm. I played in Quebec City, so that was full French. There was, you could go into shops and restaurants there, and all they spoke was French. So I got a good dosing of it in AA ball. So when I got to the major leagues, I kind of understood a little bit about the culture. And, learned to speak just a little bit of French so I could get by. But it was definitely different. It was, at that point in time, a lot of people don't realize this, and maybe it's still today, Montreal is the second largest French-speaking city in the world, behind Paris, France. And so it was just culturally different. But I enjoyed it. I mean, the only thing I didn't like was the weather, and that was because I'm a Southern boy and I like the warm weather. And up there, if you get warm weather, you have to go out and have a picnic on the weekend or something. So it was hard from that. Good. They were rabid fans in a crappy ballpark, and. Right. they're talking about bringing the game back there. And I think Warren Cromartie, down the road from you down there in southern Florida, is involved with trying to get baseball back to Montreal.
I believe you're right. Do you think that, because, there's only one team in Canada right now, it's Toronto. Do you believe that baseball should be back in Montreal and for, at least for competitive balance? The way that it was handled before, I personally think was just awful. I think there should definitely be baseball over there again because the fans support it.
Well, you could probably write a book about how Loria worked in Montreal. And, he ended up being a billionaire with I think about a $60 million investment, maybe even less than that. The truth be known. I think that, if I was probably a Montreal fan, he would be the top of my list of great guys. I like Montreal. Charles Bronfman was a favorite of mine, the owner of the ball club. Right. I think if you brought it baseball back to Montreal, you need to build a stadium downtown, make a nice 35,000 seat stadium. They would probably, it's so hard to say, they would really support it. I think they would support it. I tell you, though, I still haven't given up on the Tampa area for baseball. I still think that area with the right ballpark, I think could support baseball and do a good job of it.
I think baseball in Montreal would be better if it were in the American League and the Toronto Blue Jays took on the Montreal Expos. Yeah. It kind of reminds you of the original six in hockey, too. So you have a good...
probably.
Yeah, you have an NHL...
Yeah, I think it needs to be American League, American League East type situation, create some real rivalries. So I agree with you there.
Yeah, you got original six, so American NHL original six. So I think... But, yeah, I wouldn't give up on Tampa either, but you're right. You have to get the ballpark in the right spot for sure. Go ahead, David.
I was kind of going to pick up on what you were saying, Scott.
Sure.
Barry, Scott and I banter back and forth on whether baseball works in Tampa or Miami. And believe it or not, I cover the Marlins for a living as well. So I'm fully aware of what Jeffrey Loria is like or what he was like. I'm sure that people loved him when he started out in Montreal, but he's vilified down in South Florida for what he did to that organization. I think baseball works for certain teams in certain cities. I think that the team itself works really well in Tampa. The location is terrible. The stadium in Miami is gorgeous, but the location for the team is awful.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think that there aren't enough local rivalries and maybe baseball needs to change its tune a little bit about how it realigns divisions?
Well, I think they should look at it. If I were picking the two teams in Florida, I would think, the demographics, because I've done a little bit of studying on this in the Tampa area, the demographics of Tampa are changing. It's getting younger. It's getting more technology driven in some of the areas they're doing business. I just don't think it's ever going to work in South Florida. I don't see it from Miami. I hate it, but I think it can work in Tampa. But I'm with you. I think they really should take some of their analytics and come up with a better formula to have some of these Yankee-Boston sort of rivalries get started where fans can really have their interest peaked on 4 or 5 times a year.
Yeah, I'll double up on what David said, too. The ballpark is by the Orange Bowl. If you had the ballpark actually where Joe Robbie Stadium, as I call it, I think it's Hard Rock Stadium, with an ideal park, I think it could be better there. You just can't put it in downtown Miami. Few people realize that they've got so many more tolls involved. It just takes too long to get down there. So centralized location in South Florida, but apparently that was the best deal Jeffrey Loria could get, sticking it there. So, yeah, I think that David's right. I think it would have better potential further north, but, with the amount of money they spent in that stadium, they're stuck with that situation whether we like it or not.
Well, that stadium, that is just an albatross around the neck of the taxpayers of that area. I've seen some of the numbers and how much they're going to have to pay back to have built that stadium. Really, it really is almost criminal what they did.
Yeah, I agree. It's a beautiful stadium, and I back everything you're saying on that. David?
if we do play baseball this year, and I know we've been talking about, we were at, 82 games, then we were at 50, then we were at 114, now we're talking 76, 78. I think the latest one was somewhere in the 60s. How does this season play out, Barry? I'm a purist, and I know that you've played in both leagues. I don't believe in the DH. I believe the pitcher should always hit. I like the strategy of base running in the National League. I'm as pure as they come. But something about this tells me that if we play this season, it's tainted. The records don't mean anything. You don't see a 20-game winner. Somebody could hit 400 because of the shortened season, and it really doesn't mean anything. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think this is certainly an asterisk season. But if you're a purist, that game left you a couple years ago. There is no purity in the game anymore. The game has changed for good, not for the word good, but for it's gone. The game we used to love and enjoyed watching is no more. It's driven by a bunch of smart guys with computers that in all, I had this discussion the other day, and it's really the truth. Instead of having owners get together and collude, they've allowed the analytics of the game to create collusion that's legal. So they just send out all the same numbers amongst each other, and they're putting values on players. And collusion is not in the game per se, but you may as well have collusion because the analytics of the computers are setting up the values for the players, telling you how many innings a pitcher should pitch. It unfortunately has changed our game forever and ever.
Do you still watch the game and are you content with it? Do you think it's a better product, or are you frustrated with it?
I think they got great young players. I don't appreciate the way they run the games anymore. I think and it could change with the younger fans, although they're having a heck of a time getting any traction with younger fans. And maybe that's what they think they're doing, but I don't think fans enjoy going to a game and seeing 7 or 8 different pitchers pitch. And obviously they're trying to change the rules to where that is the way it's going to be going forward. But I just don't, this whole thing about the catching. The catching is god awful now because everybody's worried about trying to frame, and it's just for a purist catching guy watching them catch today it's really ugly. So it's different, and I don't want to be like the old guys. Oh, look, I love these young players. They got a lot of great young players, and the stuff that happened in Houston. That's an awful thing. That's a real stain on the sport. But they had a great group of young players, and I guess the players are under so much pressure today. Look, I am all for taking advantage of anything the other team is doing that's within the bounds of the rule book. If you can steal pitches, location, give signs, do this and that within the realm of what is legal, and if it's legal and the other team doesn't like it, knock some guys on their butt. But to take technology and do what they did, that's really, really a bad taste in I think everybody's mouth.
Who do you think is the best all-around catcher in baseball today?
That's a good question because it was his name out of San Francisco. He was the best for a good handful of years.
Buster Posey, I believe, right?
Posey was the best. Today they got a lot of guys that are just sort of, you got Molina, who's, fading away a little bit from just being 37, 38 years old. I think they got some young guys coming up that could be. I tell you who I think has got a chance to be a real star is the number 1 draft pick by the Orioles. I can't remember his name now. Came out of Oregon or Oregon State.
Yeah.
Weissman.
I don't know his name. I don't remember.
Yeah, I think he's got a chance to be a star. It looks like he can catch and throw. I believe he's a switch hitter. So, I think of the catching today is more of a real good group of mediocre catchers, not a real good group of great catchers. When when I was coming along, we had Carter, we had Bench, and we had Ted Simmons, who all went to Hall of Fame. That's a pretty good group.
Right.
And then we had the next level of guys that were all, pretty good. So I don't think the catching is there. And they're changing their thought process on catching. And I think, you're seeing guys catch less games. So I don't know if you're going to have the superstar like he used to have, where he goes and plays 10 years and catch 125 to 140 games a year. You just don't see that very much anymore.
Hey, Barry and David, our crack statistician Candy said the name is Adley Rutschman.
Rutschman,
yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
Rutschman, yes.
I'm glad we have that for our help, because my mind is only remembering things for a very short period of time now. So I'm glad we got a statistician in the background.
Oh, we do. We try to do things first class here in the WSAN network. That's for sure. So
there you go.
so
Barry, the reason. Let me just drop this real quick, Scott, and I'll give it back to you.
Sure.
The reason why I asked about the catching is I'm here in Jacksonville. I cover the Marlins for a living, in addition to doing football. I had a chance to see JT Realmuto play minor league baseball and then move through the Marlins organization, and now he's with the Phillies. Is he as close to a complete all-around catcher as there is in the game today, I guess is what I want to ask.
I'd have to say he's probably, he's in that top, for sure, the top tier. And I think you could make an argument that, from the standpoint of catching, throwing, and hitting, he's probably the most complete package out there right now. And they're going to have to, he's coming up for a contract.
Yeah, they're going to pay him. Yes.
So they'll either pay him or somebody else will. And fortunately for him, they got pretty. They hate to let go of a guy they gave up players for, especially one who looks like he could be a real star type player.
Definitely. Okay, Scott, it's yours.
Okay, so that's all right. So Barry, how is baseball better today than it was when you actually played the game?
I think the athletes are probably better. I think they're, I hear this from people all the time. So, the game's not as good as it used to be. Well, this would be the only sport where the athletes aren't better. So I don't buy that. The athletes are better. I think, pitching is different. They got a lot of hard throwers, but they don't last long. And they got a lot of those 100-mile-an-hour guys who end up getting their arms operated on, the Tommy John surgery. So it's just a different game. I don't know that. I don't think from the standpoint of the fans watching the game, it's better. I think it's different. I think that they're going to have to be really careful that they don't allow the analytics to overtake the purity of the game, which I think it's already started doing, if it hasn't already gone too far. So I think that's where the game is really, really different. And I don't consider that better. I think it's just, it's different.
So with you saying that, Barry, let's talk about the current state of baseball. I know that you're talking about the analytics. We've talked about that a lot. How would you describe what the current state of baseball really is?
Well, I think they're they're sort of at the tipping point of which way they're going to end up going. I mean, obviously it's a long season, and I don't think baseball needs to get out there and start playing so people don't forget how much they enjoyed, the summary of the game, the statistics of the game. This game is a game of statistics. I think David hit a good point. When you have a shortened season like this, then all these stats they lose any of their real value. I think one of the things that makes our game different is people can rattle off stats about players. You can't really do that in other sports, not very much. And the true baseball fan can rattle off stats, and stats are important. And I thought this year we're going to lose all that. And I think what we really got to do to keep baseball current is we've got to really try hard to cultivate these young fans and keep them interested. I know that there's all kinds of players that are playing the game. There's all kinds of travel ball going on. My son was involved with coaching. I helped him a little with that. So I know there's a great deal of interest. But we've got to really cultivate those young people to keep them interested in the game, because the minds of kids today have changed. They're more very short span of concentration, and they want something that stimulates them, from moment to moment. And baseball is more of a relaxing, laid back event. It's different than football, basketball, and even hockey. And so I think that's going to be a challenge for the games, how they're going to be able to handle that.
So, Barry, if they don't play in 2020, would this be more devastating and more difficult to come back than it was in 1994? Because there are no Sammy Sosas, Mark McGuire's, or Cal Ripken Jr.'s to bail them out this time. How badly does baseball need to play, and will it be worse to come back after it was 1994? It took a long time for that sport to rebound.
Well, they were lucky to rebound, but they're going to play baseball. Like I said, they have no choice. The owners are going to dictate to them something. They're trying to do it, as a negotiated settlement. But if they can't get it settled probably this week, they're just going to say, this is when we're going to do this, and we're going to start. And what will happen then, you'll see, is that the Players Association will file a grievance, say that they forced them to do this in which they'd already signed their agreement in March. They were going to play under a pro rata salary basis, so they'll file a grievance, but they will play. There will be a baseball season, probably a minimum of 60 games. So they're going to be on the field. Don't worry about that. There definitely will be baseball this year.
So let's go back to the Yankees. I know we touched on it earlier, but we talked about your favorite Yankees to manage. Would you say that the favorite ones that you had then, that's reiterating on, were that Eric Plunk, Tim Burtis, Dick Scott, or do you want to add any more names to that list?
Oh, Tim Byron was one of my favorites. I tell you, I had a great group of kids that just, Lombardi, my catcher. I just go down the whole list of those kids, and a lot of them I managed 3 different levels, 3 different seasons.
Right.
So, I stay in contact with Dick Scott because he's in minor league. I don't know what his exact title is, but he was with the Marlins, and he's up the ladder with their minor league. I don't know if he's called a director.
He's their minor league director.
Okay,
he's their park position director.
Yeah. So I talk to Dick Eve, quite often, so I stay in contact with him. Probably by far the player, I think the question was asked. I don't think players stay in contact as much as you would think with other players. I stay in very close contact with Dave LaRoche. Actually go visit him in Mexico. He's got a home in Mexico, and I'll go down, and my wife and I go visit he and his wife. So, in fact, we may even buy a place where they've got a place. So, I think that's probably what happens in baseball. In my life, I got away from baseball and got into the business world, so I kind of lost contact with a lot of my baseball buddies. But Dave and I were, we were together a long time, so we continue to stay in very close contact.
You were a successful manager in the minor leagues, but do you wish that you had the opportunity to manage at the Major League Baseball level?
Yeah, I think that would be my biggest regret is not getting the opportunity to manage at the big league level. And I had a lot of success at the minor leagues, and it would have been fun and challenge to manage at the big league level. I'd say looking back, that would be my biggest disappointment.
Yeah, I remember when we were in Fort Lauderdale together, you went up to the South Atlantic League, and I did with the Gastonia Rangers. It's amazing how we've followed each other in leagues after that. So describe your experience in the South Atlantic League.
Well, I had a great group of players there. I think on that team, I think I had like 14 of those guys ended up going to the big leagues. So that was a great group of players. We ended up winning the league championship. Now, we didn't have the superstar players that you guys had at Gastonia.
Oh, I know.
You had 3 players that, the third baseman and Sosa and Gonzalez. And what was the third baseman?
Dean Palmer? Dean Palmer, I believe, wasn't it?
Palmer, yeah, Dean Palmer.
Right.
So you had 3 guys who went on to have great careers. We had a lot of guys that had good careers, but not the superstar careers. Although I did have another Cy Young Award winner there, Pat Hinkin, that came from that ball club. So that was really. We played in the most god awful place though. That was the first year they had baseball in Myrtle Beach.
Right. Yeah, I remember
and
that.
We used a facility that was basically Coastal Carolina was using the field, but it was awful. We actually dressed underneath a high school set of football seats. There was a little clubhouse under there that wouldn't even, I mean, it was awful. I mean, really, they wouldn't even allow that to happen in today's baseball. But, you know, we had good group of kids there. It was different. It was a whole totally 180-degree different operation in the Blue Jays organization.
Yeah, can you imagine?
They drafted heavily and signed heavily quality athletes, just athletes.
Yeah, that Gastonia.
So it took a while for some of those guys to develop, but they were very good athletes.
That Gastonia Rangers team lost 90 games, Barry, and we had like 12 major leaguers. That just blows me away.
Yeah.
You talk about raw. I mean, that was definitely raw. So
they were. Well, all those kids were really young too. I think one of those was 17 or 18, and Gonzalez was very young. Palmer might have been a little bit older, but those two were really young. Oh
yeah. I remember when Sammy couldn't barely talk English, but we got along great. We had an unbelievable time. In fact, I would catch up with him later at Joe Robbie Stadium, and what I had to do to get that interview. Once he smiled at me, I looked at the Cubs PR person. Now, you believe me? And she says, yeah. Then I got a one-on-one with him. But once Sammy saw me, because we spent the whole year together, for crying out loud, he's going to remember me. And boy, did I make that lady. Let me tell you, she gave me what I wanted. Once Sammy gave me the old smile in the batting cage. So let's talk about your playing career. You know, reflect on it. And what were the highlights of your playing career?
Well, you know, my rookie year was, you know, it was always fun. I was 22 years old, you know, called 125 games or whatever. So that was, you know, a memorable year. And, you know, playing with the Cubs was a lot of fun. You know, I had a game there where I hit a game-tying home run in the 8th and a grand slam in the 9th to win it. Had 8 RBIs on the day. You know, those are games that, you know, at the time was the most RBIs that anybody had ever had with the Cubs in one game.
Right.
Since then, I think Leon Durham broke that record. So, you know, there's all kinds of things like that. Being with the Phillies when we had really good teams was always, you know, that's a great memory there. Being with Steve Carlton. You know, Hall of Famer Mike Schmidt, who was probably the best player in the game in his career when I was with Philadelphia, and you know, going to New York. I mean, it doesn't get much bigger than New York, and it doesn't get much bigger than a New York Yankees, Los Angeles Dodgers World Series. So I had a lot of great moments. You know, fortunate to play on really good teams with a lot of Hall of Famers, future Hall of Famers. And then, you know, got a chance to coach at the major league level with a lot of future Hall of Famers. Got to coach with Bo Jackson when Bo was trying to make a comeback from his hip injury from football.
Really?
So, you know, a lot of really interesting, you know, times and things that you don't really get a chance to do in any other sport. So I was very fortunate.
What was Bo Jackson like to work with, Barry?
I'm sorry, you broke up.
That's all right. What was Bo Jackson like to work with?
A great guy.
Was he?
Bo was a great teammate. He was a great storyteller. At that time, he was probably the biggest name in all of sports, and you would never know it. He was just. He had a heart. He was kind of like Michael Jordan from the standpoint of it was hard for him to sit down and have breakfast or lunch or anything without fans wanting his autograph. I remember, and my son would tell you this story today, is that he was sitting in a restaurant and he called my son over to him. He said, "Sit down here, Footy." And my son sat down with him, and when fans would come over, he says, "Come on, leave me alone a little bit. I'm here eating. I'm eating with my son here, so leave me alone." So, you know, that's one of those things that my son will never forget.
Wow. I mean, he's one of my all-time favorite athletes for sure. I love Bo Jackson. We talked about social injustice. Why don't you take the lead on this one, David? Do you have any things you want to ask Barry? And then I'll go ahead and follow up with you about social injustice that's taken place in the last week or 2 weeks.
You know, Barry, because it's a divide, it's a great divide that everybody is involved with, whether it's in smaller communities where you live or larger communities where I live in Jacksonville even broader areas like South Florida, New York, LA, wherever you want to talk about it. How do you think this generation deals with it to help make change better than maybe, say, we did in our younger time? It's affecting everybody. So what is your thought on how this is being handled?
Well, let me start off by saying this. To preface anything I tell you, I played with a teammate named Andre Thornton, and we would have some discussions about race and things going on. And I remember one day I said, Andre, I know how you feel. And he looked at me, and Andre went on to become a minister after his day, so he was a straight-up guy. He said, let me just tell you something. You'll never know how I feel. And I think that's the difference. I was raised in the South. My father was my coach most of my youth, and he put together a fully integrated basketball program on Saturday mornings when integration was unheard of around the state of North Carolina. It was the first time ever. And I think because of that, I actually coached black kids, white kids, black girls. We had girls and boys basketball. We just didn't. I'm sure it's always been here. There's certainly social injustice, but there's been tremendous strides taking place over the last 20, 25 years, and I hope that doesn't get lost in what's going on right now. And I think that one of the things that probably worries me the most is that the social injustices and the Black Lives Matter movement doesn't get waylaid by radical left-wing groups that want to just, take that issue, not get the real problem solved, and use it as a political whipping stick to try to get their issues taken care of and, really drag us toward more socialistic sort of country that has never worked around the world. So if we can use this time to really address the problems with race, then I think that's a great thing. But if we don't use this time to take care of those problems, I think I worry for our country.
So with that said, do you have a problem if anybody kneels for the national anthem? Do you have a position on that?
I quit watching football for 2 years because of that.
Oh, did you?
I do have a problem with it. I think that the athletes today have such a great platform that I believe they could use a different platform to air their grievances. And to doing it there, even if they don't mean for it to be disrespecting the military, the flag, etc., that's how it looks and feels. And I think there's other ways they could make their statement. But look, like Andre Thornton told me, I'll never know. I'll never know what they feel. I'll never know what the black community feels. I know that, from my athletic days and my days in my life, black, white, green, or yellow, I don't care what the color of anybody's skin is, the content of their character is what I go by. And, there's some bad white people, there's some bad black people, but that's just the way life is. And I can tell you, reflecting back on my life, some of the best interactions I've ever had when I've needed things like stuck on the side of the road on the interstate. In fact, this happened on the interstate coming back from Florida. The person who stopped to help, it was Dave LaRoche and I. This was after our season, and we'd won the championship over in Tampa, and we were going home, and we were stuck on the side of the road. And the person who stopped to help us, and we're trying to get somebody to give us some help, we're sitting on I-95, was a black gentleman, probably 50 years old, from the state of North Carolina. And he was the guy who stopped to help us go down the road. So look, it's the content of what people, who people are. I hope that we can get beyond these social injustices to where, a black child doesn't have to be, a black male child especially, be told how they should act around a policeman. They should be able to act just like anybody else. But like I say, I really taken to heart what Andre Thornton said to me, 40 years ago, when he said that I'll never know. how he felt, and that's the truth.
You know, Barry, I think one of the many things I really respect out of you is not only what you did in baseball, but what you've done with life after baseball. When I bring individuals on for the broadcast, that's something I like to look at, but obviously our relationship goes back to the early 80s. So why don't you talk about life after baseball? As much as you would have liked to have managed in the big leagues, why don't you promote and talk about your business and define what Barry Foote is outside the lines?
Well, I was very entrepreneurial even when I was playing the game, and started up some businesses while I was still playing. But after I got out, I became very entrepreneurial. My cousin and I started a company called F2 Technologies. We developed a technology to read gas, water, electric meters from an airborne platform, which could be an airplane, it could be a drone in today's world. And we patented that technology, and it's being deployed now in the U.S. I did things up in Alaska, developed 2 gas fields up in Alaska. Have done various things with technology here in the lower 48. Presently, have actually worked with some real analytics department at Princeton University on some big data analytics. Work with a group out of California now on something called forward error correction. My present work right now in our company we just started 2 years ago, we're working in the biocide world, and just happens to be sort of serendipitous that we have a technology that we have worked with a company out of Charleston, South Carolina, and this technology is a biocide that is completely safe for human beings, but it will kill the COVID-19 and basically any other kind of virus or bacteria. It's applied in a aerosol sort of spray, and it a human being doesn't even have to leave the room, and this will kill all the things that cause these diseases that we're worried about. So we're working on that. One of my real pet projects that I've developed the technology for was the elimination of hog lagoons. We're the second largest hog producer in the country, and we got 3,300 hog lagoons, which is basically an open cesspool around our state that the waste products from the hog facilities go into these lagoons, and we have a technology to eliminate the need for those lagoons, which will certainly help our environment. So, I've stayed very busy in a lot of different things in the entrepreneurial world, and hopefully I'm kind of sort of hoping to wind down the next 2 years and maybe bring my son back from Alaska, where he's been worked for us up there in the oil fields, and hopefully hand off what I'm doing to him. That's what sort of my game plan is. Would
you ever want to return to baseball if the right opportunity came along?
It's got to age out, buddy.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. Hey, Barry, come on, man. Sometimes you wonder whether or not you'd want to, if you had that little taste. Yeah, you know what? With the amount of knowledge, any organization that would bring you on would only be better because of Barry Foote, because you've lived it, man. You have. I know that thing called age, I always look at it, Barry, as just a number, but I got to ask. Come on, man.
I'll be honest with you. The only interest I would have at this point in time would be ownership.
Really?
And so without that, I probably wouldn't have any real interest. I enjoy it, to watch it. I love talking to Dickie Scott, who's, on the field now, and we talk about the different things that are going on. But the only thing that really would interest me right now would be ownership.
See, but I got that out of you. You know what that means? You're a baseball lifer, right, David? Right?
I would call it that.
Yeah. Come on, Barry. Thank you very much for revealing that ownership. Hey, come on, folks. Would you ever want to... Hey, listen, I know it's a long shot, but if Alex Rodriguez or anybody ever buys a stake in the Mets, would you ever want to get back there and get involved with the Mets? After all, their ownership is a little somewhat questionable.
Yeah. That's why I read these things. I sure do. So I think the way we've actually got a group that's sniffing around a little bit, but I think if you're going to get in, you're going to probably have to go to like a Tampa and offer to build the stadium.
Yeah,
have that part of your package.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, but, I had to throw it out there for crying out loud. But let's face it, you're a different person altogether. You've probably done as well outside of the game of baseball as you did in the game of baseball. You've taken the lessons that you've learned in the game of baseball and applied to them in entrepreneurial. Am I on target with that?
Yeah, I will say this, and I've brought some of my friends into different things that I've done through the years, and I just tell them, you're not going to ever be bored. And I certainly have not had a boring life. I will say that.
Well, that's good to know. Hey, by the way, everybody, you're listening to 108 Stitches Baseball Talk on the WSAN Network. My name is Scott Morgan, Roth of Motor City Madmouth, along with my co-host David Levin, and we're happy to have Barry Foote as our guest tonight. Barry is one of my great friends, and to me, when you talk about a lifelong friend, Barry Foote, that definitely lets you know how I feel about you. You're truly one of the best people out there, and I'm so proud every time we get an opportunity to talk baseball and life. David, any other questions?
I appreciate that, Scott. That's very heartwarming coming from you.
Well, you know what? To me, you're a great friend, and North Carolina is not that far. Even though we tried to work it out when I was at the NSMA convention a year ago, I have every intention to get up to North Carolina, and I can go out there and reminisce more about Fort Lauderdale Stadium, which we called home when we were here. David, anything you want to add with Barry before we talk about how everybody get a hold of each other?
Actually, I really enjoyed it. I think what's great, and Scott, you and I have talked about this before, we were covered this sport for a living. We eat, sleep, and breathe it because we're involved in it for lack of a better word, we're financially, obligated to do it. But we're purists as well because we love the sport itself. And when we can talk to players and former managers and former coaches who have a perspective of the different side of the sport as opposed to watching it and being part of it, it makes it that much more special.
Yeah, Barry.
Yep.
Barry,
thank you much. I really appreciate this.
Let me ask you a question that just came to mind. What are your thoughts about interleague play?
Well, I think that boat sailed. I think it's you kind of expect it now. I think people enjoy the Yankees and the Mets and the different interleague sort of rivalries that you can create by having interleague play. I mean, if I had my way, I probably wouldn't do it. But I think that's part of the game now. That's expected.
Okay. Well, fair enough. So, all right, Barry, why don't you go ahead and let everybody know how they can get a hold of you? How's that sound? You lead off. Since it's a baseball show, we always had a leadoff hitter. Now you can lead off here with how people can contact you.
Well, probably the best place to find me is go to LinkedIn. I check my LinkedIn information. So if people are out there, they can find me on LinkedIn.
Okay, David, go ahead.
Okay, well, I write for fansided.com. I cover the Miami Marlins at marlinmaniac.com. I also cover the Jacksonville Jaguars at blackandteal.com. I'm on Twitter at DM7199907. I'm also the co-host of 108 Stitches broadcast with Scott,
which is what you're listening to. And just to give you our information, as much as Barry knows how hard I've worked to try to build this platform, I'll give him the full barrel now. You can find us on Twitter at Tribune South, Facebook, South Florida Tribune, like the page. You'll get updates. Instagram, of course, I'm learning how to work with that, but getting better. South Florida Tribune, YouTube channel, when the pandemic clears away. South Florida Tribune, we have our own. I will get that up and rolling. The website is www.southfloridatribune.com. Email southfloridatribune@gmail.com. And I reconnected with Barry on Indeed LinkedIn. Okay, no, not Indeed, where you apply for jobs, but LinkedIn. The shows on the network include the Sports Exchange, the South Florida Tribune podcast, which we had earlier tonight, 108 Stitches Baseball Talk, which you are listening to at the moment, The Real and the Rare with Xavier McKnight, Fantasy Football, myself and Ryan Skolrud, Motorman and Rude Dog, and our brand new show, Barry, which I'm excited about, is No Limits. Maybe we'll have to bring you on there one day and talk about just your business alone. How would you like that?
That would work.
Oh, that's going to be a great show.
I'll do whatever I can to help you out, Scott.
Oh, I appreciate that. And again, you know what? No limits. We'll just make the rule here that it won't be any sports. We're going to just talk about anything that comes to mind. But I think it's been an unbelievable time tonight. And you guys, like I said, I think the world of both of you. Again, Barry, I can reiterate till I lose my voice. But you know how you feel with me. You're an extended part of my family, Barry. And I hope you always remember that.
I appreciate it, Scott and Dave. It was nice meeting you tonight.
So on behalf of...
Great meeting you, sir. Thank you so much.
So on behalf of Barry Foote, my name is Scott Morgan, Roth Motor City Madmouth, along with my co-host David Levin. Thank you for joining us here on the WSAN Network, 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. Good night, everybody.
Good night.